to wait until it's officially 8:30. I'd like to call the organizational meeting of the Leelanau County Construction Board of Appeals to order. The purpose of this meeting will be to elect the officers, and so we will start out our meeting with a pledge of allegiance. Those that are able, please rise, and we will state the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call vote, please, or roll call, I should say, attendance.
George Kawalachi.
Here.
Clint Cook.
Present.
Nate Griswold.
Here.
Robert Miller.
Here.
John Walter.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda as stated? Thank you. It's been first and seconded. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We will allow 3 minutes for anyone interested in making public comment. Is there anyone interested in public comment at this time? There being no public comment, we will move on. The next action item is the election of chairman. Do we have a nomination for chairman?
I nominate Bob.
No.
Well, we first would have to have a second on that, but you declined. We'll go with that. Is there any other nominations for chairman? Gentlemen, we will need to stay here until we have a chairman.
Probably turnarounds, but nominate John.
After going through this documentation, I would not accept. It was getting too complicated and
Speak into the
difficult.
microphone.
Okay. You will need to all speak into the microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, pull those on up.
For me, this is a complicated situation. And if I had more legal background on things, I might feel more comfortable.
Okay, so we still need to move forward. Having a chairman of the committee will be required for us to take action. This is an inevitable element of serving on a committee. So I would encourage, we do provide, legal support and legal assistance if necessary to the committee, as well as myself. So again, I would beseech you to please identify an individual that would speak for the group.
I'll nominate him.
Is this for the board for how long, or just this event?
It would be for this year, for this term, which would, at the end of the year, the term would. Yeah.
And what are the hours requirements outside of this? I mean,
It would
two
most,
businesses and 2 children under 4, so I don't have any time outside of what I'm doing sitting here right now, so.
I'll defer to Amber to speak to, in the past 2 years, how many times have we called the Board of Appeals?
The board meets on an as-needed basis if someone appeals a decision made by the department, or if the department seeks clarification. Last year, we met twice, which was more than average. It's once, if at all.
Thank you. We have a nomination. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Listen, I served on
All in favor?
it. Aye.
Opposed? Was that a formal?
Formal, yeah, it's all right.
But you will accept?
I guess so, yeah.
All right. I will not say begrudgingly, we'll just say cautiously.
Okay.
Nate has accepted the position of chairman. And thank you. Nate, I will hand over the,
I don't, yeah, I'm a rookie on this stuff.
that's okay, that's all right, we will guide you through it. All you
All
have to.
right.
So the next order of business is to call for nominations for a vice chairman.
Does anybody want to nominate a vice chairman for the Board of Appeals?
I'll nominate Bob.
Bob has accepted. Do we have a second?
He seconded it.
Okay.
Oh,
You say all in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed?
Any opposed?
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is election of a secretary. Is there any nominations for secretary of the Board of Appeals?
Nominate this gentleman. I wouldn't be any good for that.
We do have a formal record keeper, so the position is more posthumous than it is having.
I nominate John.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Then,
Got ya.
and then Nate, you call for the vote.
So the vote, all those in favor of nominating John as the the secretary of the Board of Appeals?
Okay.
Any,
Yes.
Any opposed?
any opposed?
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Good job.
Public comment is the next agenda items. You have 5 minutes.
Seeing none, you can say,
I've seen none. We can move on to the next agenda item. Board member.
board member comment. I'm sorry, that should have been on the same.
Board member comment.
I'll say something.
Okay.
After having read the documents, after having read the documents, I can see why people are reluctant. Because this is not going to be easy. But the one part that I saw that I couldn't even read were the drawings. The lettering in there was so small. I really couldn't make any sense of them. I did read all the rest of the commentaries, the positions, and I think I understood them. But as far as the drawing is concerned, that's a guess. That's my comment.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
I went out, took a look at the building. It amazes me that they're that far into construction and everything, completion, and we're here talking about a code restriction.
For me, a question, and maybe it's for later, but
Mhm.
if I can understand it now, and on this particular project, the project's under construction. Are I know we have the area of ventilation, alarms and power and protection of electricity in question. But are they red tagged? It's not clear to me the status of it. I'd rather ask without the petitioner being,
So I think that any further questions about the appeal, we should wait until the actual appeal. I will be doing a brief recap for it, but yes, there is a stop worker on the site.
okay, that's what I assume, but I don't like to assume.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amber, for that.
Thank you.
Any last comments? No? So then adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
For motion.
All right.
You have officially completed your first meeting.
All right, thanks.
You survived it.
I did.
I don't know.
If you go back up to the hall,
I'm confused.
there's the last office.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's about time. We have 1 minute.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call to order the Leelanau County Building Safety Department's Board of Appeals meeting at 9 o'clock. And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have roll call.
George Pawlacci,
Here.
Clint Cook,
Present.
Nate Griswold,
Here.
Robert Miller,
Here.
John Walter,
Here.
all present.
All right. I'd like to call for a
Approval of the.
approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion passed. Approval of the minute.
Actually,
It's a,
you'd call for the vote.
oh, sorry.
That's all right. It's all good. So we had a first and a second, so we just need to call for the vote.
I'd call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh,
Any
they-
opposed?
Sorry, my bad. You all raised your hands. That was good.
No opposition. Motion passed. Approval of the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we need to call, sorry.
First.
round.
There was a first, I believe,
Yep.
and then we need a second.
Seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Conflict of interest. I actually have one. I am bidding, I bid on this project for the tasting room portion of this project for the rooftop, for the vegetative rooftop and rooftop pavers. And after discussing this with Deb, I will participate in the conversation today, but I will recuse myself for the vote. Any other conflicts of interest? So next item, public comment. You have 3 minutes. No public comment at 9:03, so we'll move to the next agenda item, board member comments. So,
What about that? I only have a comment. I sent an email to Deb about this whole project. And I'm concerned. It's essentially what I wrote in our email.
okay. Any other comments? No other comments, so we'll move to the action item number 1, which is a reconvene of the appeals board meeting requested by Christopher Frederickson of the Traverse City Whiskey Company regarding ventilation requirements for new whiskey barrel storage building under construction at 9440 South Center Highway, Traverse City. The first item is a recap of the October 27th, 2022 appeal and a progress to date from, I believe, Amber.
So I'll keep this brief, just so I can turn it over to Chris and Christine. But we met in October before you guys at that time. At the end of the meeting, you motioned to table the discussion and put it back between Chris's team and my team to resolve the issue of ventilation. So since that time, we have been going back and forth, working to resolve the issue. We've not been able to come to a resolution, so we are back before you guys today. I'll leave the recap at that. And turn this over to Chris and his team.
Thank you, Amber. Next item, I'd like to invite the applicant to present his request.
So, good morning. We haven't met before. My name's Ethan Bolts. I'm going to present on behalf of Mr. Frederickson. Partially, I think you've met Scott Warren before. I'm sure you're going to have questions. He's probably going to be the guy to answer them, not me. But I think what Amber said is correct. Both sides have been working hard to try and figure this thing out, but I think they're just at a point where there's a fundamental disagreement about what the proper ventilation standard for this building is. And we need somebody to make a decision, and that's why we're here before the board today. And we appreciate you convening for that purpose. Essentially,
Before you proceed, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Your role in this?
I'm sorry, I'm the attorney for Traverse City Whiskey Company. So simply, the dispute is which ventilation standard is the proper ventilation standard to apply to this building. It's either 0.06 CFM per square foot, or the county believes it is 1 CFM per square foot. We have a 20,000 square foot warehouse. It's, as you know, to be used as a brick house or storage warehouse for barrels. And how you get to what the proper ventilation standard is, I want to add, before I get there, that this building was built to be naturally ventilated. There are windows placed all over the building so that air will flow through and ensure the proper ventilation that's required to operate the building safely. And how you get to the standard, you have to kind of play connect the dots with a bunch of different code sections. And I'll be honest with you, it gives me a headache trying to do it. But where you start is with the Michigan Mechanical Code, section 102.1. What that code section says is that specific provisions of the code govern over general ones. And that really boils down what the basic dispute between Traverse City Whiskey Company and the county is here, is that we believe there is a specific code provision that governs this ventilation standard, and the county believes the general one applies. And the general one is the 1 CFM, and we believe the specific of the 0.06. So you move off of 102.1 of the Mechanical Code, and then you go to section 502.9.5, which governs liquid storage warehouses. And contained within 502.9.5, in that section, there is a exemption that says liquids that are exempt from the International Fire Code are exempt under this section. So then you got to connect the dot again from there. You go from 502.9.5 to 5,000.1.1, exception number 10 under 5,001.1. And what that one says specifically is that the storage of beer, distilled spirits and wines, barrels and casks are expressly exempt from the requirements of the International Fire Code. That's what we're storing, distilled spirits in barrels. And 5000.1.1 specifically exempts those barrels from the fire code. So since they are exempt under 5001.1 exception 10, they are also exempt over 502.9.5. And that's how you get to the specific exemption. So the Michigan Mechanical Code thus only requires the .06 standard. Now, Traverse City Whiskey Company tested that standard and did so at the request of the building official here. And they didn't just do a normal test. They tested it under the most extreme conditions possible. They were asked to perform a test of how the ventilation performed, using an assumption that 75% of the entire evaporation, water vapor that would be coming out of their barrels, would occur in a 2-month period. That means that was the conditions they put on the test. We're gonna make it the most extreme situation. In a normal year, you're never gonna get 75% of the evaporation in 2 months. They assumed it for the test. That was the baseline they were using. They did it, and under the .06 CFM standard, the results still passed. So we asked for the opportunity to prove it to the county and to this board, and we think we have. And the reason why we need to be here and we need to take action on this is because of the nature of the facility and what we're putting in there and what it is itself. The ricks, which are really the storage racks, are in danger. The longer they sit in that warehouse not in use, they become inoperable. They're made out of pine or spruce fir. There's moisture inside of the wood in those ricks. The longer that they sit there not in use without the weight binding them, they disintegrate and become obsolete. They can't just sit there forever. Now the county wants a level of ventilation in this building that doesn't compute with the actual use. If using the 1 CFM standard in this type of warehouse will actually do damage to the product sitting inside of it. It's too much ventilation, way too much. Again, I've been working with these guys for years. I actually do know about whiskey barrels now and evaporation. A whiskey barrel is actually a living, breathing piece of equipment, we'll call it. It's a fascinating process how they make whiskey, but the wood is really where all the flavor in what you drink comes from. The whole process, and it's got to be New American White Oak, or they can't call it bourbon. That's a law. They have to set it on fire because it makes a charcoal filter. They put their liquid in, and it goes into the wood. And the process of coming in and out of the wood is what flavor and develops the whiskey that everybody likes to drink so much. If there's too much ventilation in that facility, that wood dries out too much. It becomes brittle. What happens is the barrels will actually break down and start to leak. And then you've got a whole warehouse full of whiskey barrels dropping their whiskey on them, and they simply can't operate the facility in the way that it was meant to be, and the way that these facilities are operated all over the country. That's why the .06 is the proper standard. It fits the use of the building. So it simply just can't be a rick house with the level of ventilation that is wanted to be put in there. So there has to be some sort of compromise here, at least. I mean, we believe that the proper standard is .06, and facilities like this all across the country use that same standard. But in the event the board disagrees with the applicant's interpretation of the code, we're seeking a variance because we need to be able to operate our business the way it's intended to operate. And we need to be able to put the whiskey barrels in a place where they're going to develop and mature and get the product that everybody loves to buy. So in the event that you think we're wrong and you don't agree, we'd seek a variance from the code provision that would allow the operation of the business with a safe level of ventilation that doesn't over-ventilate and damage our products. And we believe it's safe at .06. The International Fire Code permits it. It's in the code, and it's been used time and again. But there is a middle ground here, and that is the applicant proposed a phased startup plan to the county. It's a middle ground. Let us prove it to you. Conditionally approved permits that allow us to finish our facility and start putting it into action with a slow phased buildup of barrels going to that warehouse that can be inspected and measured and determined to be safe before it's at full capacity. And let us show you that it works. That way, both sides' goals are met. I don't think the county doesn't want this facility to operate. I think it's to everybody's benefit. It benefits the community, brings jobs, brings a product that's well known and everybody frankly likes. But both sides really have the same goal, which is an operable, effective, efficient, and safe facility. We want our employees to be safe. We want the community to be safe. I know the county does too. So all we're asking for is the opportunity to prove it.
Do we ask questions at this point?
I believe so.
Couple questions I have is, you're talking about windows. Are the windows open all the time?
The windows are open in the summertime when the whiskey is actually evaporating. So the windows are everything in this. In fact, hundreds of thousands of whiskey barrel warehouses operate in Scotland and Kentucky with these windows just like this.
Okay, I'm just asking a question. Are the windows open all the time? You've answered it. Thank you. And the windows have screens?
Yes.
Fine. If we were doing the testing that you're talking about with windows, who's performing the testing, the monitoring? Who's paying for the cost of that?
I believe we are.
Yeah, we would pay for the cost of that time.
And who's doing it?
Well, so
An independent testing agency?
it would be our intention to have a collaborative relationship with the county and with an agreed upon tester to go through this process together.
Okay. And the Traverse City Whiskey Company is a member of Discus, correct?
That is correct.
And Discus recommendations is an acceptable alternative is to provide ventilation at a rate of not less than 1 cubic foot per minute per square foot. Ventilation shall be accomplished by natural or mechanical means which discharge or exhaust at a safe location. So the Discus organization, which is, from what I'm reading, and I'm no expert on whiskey, a highly respected organization that big distillers, small distillers, many distillers in this country are members of. Perhaps your architectural firm is even an associate member. And they recommend the 1, not 0.6. And obviously, if they're recommending 1, that would suggest that they don't believe it's deleterious to the product. So I'm confused on that. If someone could explain it, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, that area of Discus, where it says an acceptable alternative, is 1 CFM. The first part of that says that Discus recommends that they maintain concentrations of alcohol vapor of less than 25% of the LFL.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge with that is some people don't know how to do the calculation for that. So if you don't do the calculation, to assure that you're staying under the LFL, then 1 CFM will work from a safety standpoint. So
That is the safe level.
it is the maximum safe level without doing any testing or proving. The first part of the recommendation is not to provide that. That is an acceptable alternative to providing ventilation that maintains concentrations under 25%.
I read that as well, and I understand that and that would require the monitoring and control. But what I'm pointing out is, why are they saying 1%? And then I'm hearing you gentlemen indicate 1% would be deleterious to your product, when that's their safe level that they're saying.
That's not their safe level, that's their, if you don't do proper calculations, that's the fallback.
Okay, so if you don't do the proper calculations and do the monitoring and do all the process, then they're saying fallback is 1.
That's correct.
So they're saying that if fallback is a position that you're telling me is deleterious to your product, it doesn't, I'm having trouble with the organization that is highly respected in the whiskey business saying fallback 1%, and you're saying 1% is deleterious. That doesn't compute.
The discus is not saying that, if they're saying that the fallback is 1%, that they know will soon provide a level of safety. The organization is actually recommending to the members that they provide the correct amount of ventilation, which is maintaining concentrations of vapor at less than 25%.
Okay, and you've just repeated yourself again, so I'm going to repeat myself, if I may. Why are they saying the fallback position is something that you're saying is not good for the product? Why would they do that?
They're doing that so that they can provide, it's kind of a cover yourself thing. They're saying to their members, if you don't have the capability of determining the actual ventilation, we know that this will be safe.
Okay, we're loggerheads on this, because I agree with what you're saying, that they're saying 1% would be a safe level. My question is, why would they set a safe level which is too high a level for the whiskey business? It doesn't compute.
They're not setting that. They're telling their members, what you heard me say, they're not recommending that their members do that. And none of their members do provide that. It's a line, it's a footnote in their overall recommendation.
Actually, it's item 5-7.3 of ventilation, which is 5-7. The 25% that you recommend, you referenced, is 5.7.1. So it's not a footnote,
It is not technically a footnote, it is an option. The code that we're looking at here also provides options. It mostly puts it on the owners of the facility or the expert to determine what the safety is.
we agree on that. The code has some variables. But what I'm suggesting is that this organization, the Distillers Spirits Council of the United States, which you're a member of, says the 1% would be fine and a safe level. They wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't safe. I can't imagine, unless, are you suggesting that they're saying that their members should do something that would be deleterious to their business?
I'm suggesting that they're saying their members should do that if their members are not able to do what is not deleterious to the business.
That they should be deleterious to their business if they can't be non-deleterious.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're confusing me, and I'm sorry. I think I've answered your questions best I can.
Well, I don't think any of us can really speak for Discus.
I don't, I'm not asking you to, what I'm asking you to explain is why an organization that is nationally known for representing the whiskey industry would recommend something that you're rejecting.
Well, and I'm not gonna repeat what he just said. I think what I just heard really is that they know that 1 CFM is a safe standard. And that's what they're saying, is this is safe. And I think we can all agree on that. Everybody agrees on that. It's a safety concern. That is not a building or product concern. Discus is not saying this is what you should do with your facility, or this is what we recommend you do. They're saying this is what we know is safe in the alternative. Because it's in the code. We agree that this is safe. They're not stating anything different than what the code itself states.
I apologize for interrupting your presentation.
My presentation is over, by the way. We're here for questions that any of the board members might have.
The calculations that were done to meet the earlier piece of the standard, or what is being referenced here, is that something that is there a reason why somebody wouldn't do that calculation? Is it because they don't have someone to do the calculation, or why would they,
A couple of reasons facilities wouldn't do that. The biggest reason why a facility might not do that would be because they've got generational experience. Places like Kentucky, where they've been having these things built for hundreds of years, so many will just know. So they just know how to build and move the windows, and they know that works. And so they don't have to do the calculation. In most of the places where I work, which are in other parts of the country, on micro facilities like this, there isn't that generational experience in the community with these, so we do the calculations. That would be the only reason not to do the calculations, is if you in the community were just comfortable knowing that the way the building is built would work.
Okay.
I have a question about this gradual approach.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I have a question about this gradual approach. Are there steps here that you stop or you go? I don't understand how that's going to work.
We have a schedule, and it's buried in that large packet that you have. But, well, this was put together a couple months ago, but the idea is that in the first month, which we had as May, we put 1,000 barrels into the warehouse, which is 6.03% of its capacity. And then we do that again in June, another 1,000 barrels. We bring it up to 12.6%. July, 1,000 brings it to 18%. And then we do testing. Okay, so we put, roughly 20% of capacity in there. And then we take handheld testers and we go throughout, have a regular recorded way, or we can do it with a certified third party to measure what the level of alcohol vapor is. So then we get a baseline. We understand, okay, the level of alcohol vapor is X. And we know what our limit is. So we look and, I imagine the level of alcohol from 20% capacity will be pretty minimal. And as long as that checks out, it's all recorded, then they proceed in the next month, another 1,000, and so on and so forth. And I've got it, this schedule is put together to where they do that through January, and it remains at 50% capacity pretty much through the winter. And then the increase in barrels reduces, and it's adding 400 a month through the middle of the year 2026. And this schedule has testing and reporting, looks like annually, but there's room to adjust it. So, the idea is that I think we can all pretty much agree that we put one whiskey barrel in this warehouse. That's not going to evaporate enough whiskey to create any kind of hazard. I think where our issue is that we don't have that generational knowledge of the facility to know that if it's full, it won't generate. So this is an opportunity for the county and the facility to learn together and create that generational knowledge, and everyone can, that they get to begin loading. We get to stop them if the calculations that we've done to prove that it will work prove to be wrong due to whatever climate conditions that might be different here than in Kentucky or Oregon.
I've got a couple questions and observations. I just wanted to make sure on attachment A that came with your guys' email from July 13th, second paragraph, it says 0.6 CFS. Is that correct, or is it 0.06?
06, that's
Okay.
a typo.
All right, I just figured it was. I just wanted to get it on record that that is a typo there. And I've looked through this a little further, and I work in the world of professionals stamping drawings and or approving what they say how a building will function, and I'm hearing that, or I read here that that the studies and the analysis have happened. What is that backed up by from a liability perspective for the drawings and the calculations?
I've stamped these drawings and calculations, so if there is a disaster that happens, it's going to be, as you've probably seen if you've ever had a problem with the construction, the owner will sue the main architect. I'm contracted directly with them, so they would basically sue me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be responsible, and I would be asked to, they would say, you said this paper, that 0.06 CFN is okay, but then if something happened, I would be required to defend that.
Right, so that's, I think, an important clarification that it is backed by a stamped engineer, architect or engineer?
I'm an architect, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I think that's important to me to know that someone's stamping it, and to get one of those stamps, I know is difficult, so that says something. Overall, where's the other questions? I feel that, I've read about the analysis that's happened, or the testing. I personally like the gradual filling of the building and with monitoring. I think that that's safe. That's my personal opinion and a safe approach. I'm wondering, and I know that this has been looked at, what type of other than ventilation, is there any other type of fire safety stuff in the building? I think we went over it last time, but I don't recall.
It's got sprinklers in it. And
It does.
the standard is rather high, so the amount of sprinkler water that's in this building is roughly 4 times what is in the warehouse. It's 4 times what you see in this building.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been, that's an important thing in this country. And when you do have lightning strikes or issues with fires and facilities in the warehouses, there are older ones that don't have sprinklers.
Right, okay. Let's see what else I had here. Another question about the stamp. You know, the gradual approach, are you doing, when you're putting, with that proposal, would you, you'd take your calculations standing near the barrels or whatever it happens to be?
We would use a portable instrument
Uh-huh.
so that they could take calculations all around. It has multiple levels. That will not only give us better data to make sure that we're not missing any kind of pockets, but it will help them as they load this to learn for a couple reasons. It will help them to learn if they do have an area of the building that sees higher concentrations of alcohol vapor, for safety's sake, that it might need to have some, if we apply mechanical ventilation after all, it might need some there. But more importantly, well, not more important, but more likely is that they will begin to learn about each warehouse kind of has a personality, and different areas will age differently. So, if anybody knows about Pappy Van Winkle, you have to get a lottery ticket to get a blind to get this special bourbon. It's from costs $500 a bottle if you can get it. It's the same stuff that's in Buffalo Tracy's regular, but it comes from a different corner of the barrel, or of the warehouse. So these guys they'll go all around.
Right, so you have to learn the space, and that's understood, and I think with that, if there's like a map or, something of trying to learn the whole space as you put them in, rather than, if that makes sense, that would maybe be a good idea.
We would write a standard operating procedure that would have a map of what would say that this person has to go to these locations this many times a day.
Okay, and then how do you take the calculations from your gradual filling, if that was to be approved, how do you guys take that to look at the whole site? Assuming that I understand that there's variations in the building, there could be, but do you take some type of multiplier then to fit the volume of the rest of the building, or how do you determine?
So when we put the first group of barrels in, we'll monitor that for 15 days or so. And we'll take these readings each day and we'll put it into a spreadsheet. And the readings will be something like we're at 0.1% of the lower funnel. Our standard is 25% of the lower. So at location A, we're at 0.1, at location B, 0.2, location C, 0.3, and we'll just keep that raw data. And we're not, like let's say we got one location that was at 30% of the lower. That's not acceptable, even at one little location. So we would then, if we get a reading like that, then we would stop putting barrels in and we would address it. We would look and say, okay, this location, for whatever reason, has a high concentration and provide information.
Okay, and then is it standardized, the barrels you guys use, is it standardized across your product lines? It is, so that you can expect the same performance from barrel after barrel? Obviously the wood grain can be different, but is it gonna be, the barrels don't change, like, the tolerances of the wood?
Because they make bourbon, it's required, as Ethan was saying, to be
New American white oak. It can't be bourbon unless it is a brand new American white oak barrel.
Got it.
And it couldn't have had other product in it before, it can't be used, it's gotta be a brand new American white oak barrel.
Is whiskey is bourbon the only spirit that you process?
It would be bourbon or rye, but the construction, the entire approach with the barrel remains identical.
Okay.
And also to clarify one point that both Ethan and Scott have already made, our approach here, our strategy with the construction of this warehouse, the warehouse itself is designed, is purpose-built to help maintain the barrel's integrity in a uniform way. It's part of how everything's built.
Good. And, I don't know if this is something that has been discussed or not with, the county, in your group yet, but is there any, you're proposing a schedule for, testing and everything, which I think would be great. Is there any type of, just in my world, I've had to do this, performance bonding potentially, where you have a bond that's out there that says that you will do what you say you do? That's something that maybe is an opportunity here, that if it is approved, that there's a performance bond of some type that can be on the structure or on the performance, proving that you guys do what you're saying you're gonna do. So that's something that is easily obtainable, at least in my world. So that might be something the county could consider, is that it's something that, basically like insurance, but bonding.
So, yeah, on behalf of Travis Lewis, that is something that we would be very open to.
I think also it could be a condition of their permits.
Yes, that's what I was intending to say.
You could write into the permits that they follow this plan, or that they submit a plan that gets approved, and their permits rely on that.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question about what other facilities like yours are in this area?
There are none. This is the first of its kind in Michigan.
And I can give you a bit of a backstory, because this is something I have personal experience with, and why they're building this facility. This is something nobody knows about the whiskey business, but there's a company in Indiana called MGP Spirits, and they have one of these brick houses that is the size of, what, maybe 300 football fields? And distillers like Traverse City Whiskey from all over America have to pay to store their barrels in Indianapolis, because that's basically the only place to do it. And they had a problem several years ago where their barrels were found leaking and nobody was able to do anything about it, because they're in this giant complex. And the place is really unbelievable. You've never seen anything like it. I think something like 70% of the whiskey that gets drank in America touches that facility at some point. And they had no ability to take care of their product. So they wanted to bring it back here and put it here. And that's why it really is the first of its kind in this area.
My discussion. I'd like to ask the county to respond to the factor about the specific exception to the wood barrel situation that was stated. And also, secondly, what would your feelings be about progressing with our testing in this building?
Do you want us to answer now, or do you want to finish asking? I'm kind of doing this as they present, we present. and
Oh,
then
the building safety
we'll
is-
talk,
I'm sorry.
If that's okay, 'cause
No.
you guys are gonna bring up good points, we're gonna have some questions too, and I think collectively we can answer questions and dialogue.
That's the next agenda
Okay.
as the county comes up.
Yeah, I withdraw my comments then.
So do I just ask if there's any more questions from the board? Or anything else that you guys would like to add?
No, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next. Thanks, guys.
Actually,
Thank you.
I have one question. Sorry. Initially, when you submitted, you had louvers.
Yep, and what?
You had louvers,
Louvers.
and the louvers vanished and windows became standard. And if I remember what I read last October, louvers vanished without notification to the county.
Actually, our original submittal included windows. The louvers were an attempted compromise with the county, and
Which was agreed to.
it was, but then the county came back and added more requirements. So the louvers became obsolete with the additional requirements the county added.
Yeah, that's actually why we're here. The ask list, so to speak, began compounding. And we thought it was a compromise to move forward, but then that compromise to move forward led to more and more and more. And that's exactly when we pumped the brakes, and said, we need to go back to the drawing board and meet as a group to talk about what's really going on here, because the amount of asks became unreasonable.
We agreed to a lot of compromises with the county because we want to work with the county. But when they kept adding things on, we realized, why should we build it wrong to make this compromise if we're going to have to come before the board anyway? So that's why we formed back to the original correct design.
I mean, clearly, we're all concerned about fire, life safety. You don't have to go very far into research to see how many of these facilities have gone up and are now at piles of ash. It's a problem. So it's a concern.
It is a concern, and the back of the discus book, it has a list of major distillery fires and what the cause is.
And some of them are probably old enough that they don't have sprinkler systems.
Most of them, most of them don't have sprinkler systems that were in that. And the cause is usually a small fire starts from some unknown, somebody smoking or something, or lightning. And the common factor with the ones that you can Google distillery or barrel warehouse fire and see some pretty dramatic videos. The common denominator is the lack of sprinkler systems for folks.
And probably the lack of proper ventilation.
No, actually it's the lack of sprinkler system. Once a fire starts, then the whiskey barrels have metal bands that begin to expand. And then that puts more liquid on the fire. When we have sprinkler systems, the barrels, probably put too large of a log on the fire where they can't bring it to the fireplace, they can find that it just chars on the outside. So a good American oak, an inch thick, has a certain resistance to fire. And it can withstand a little bit in time for the sprinklers to put out. So I do not believe there's ever been a major whiskey barrel warehouse fire in a building that has had sprinklers.
Another question, and it's only as it relates to ventilation. And I spent a little bit of time on the internet, and the internet can be full of a lot of things. But one of the things that I did read about was whiskey fungus. And it suggests from a couple of different articles that's inevitable. And will the open windows then be an issue with that spreading to neighboring buildings, your own other buildings?
So it takes decades for it to develop. And as that fungus begins to develop, and there's not a lot of research about it, as you probably learned from the internet, that we refer to as natural flora and fauna. But it takes decades to develop. And where you see it is in communities that have hundreds of thousands of barrel warehouses.
Yeah, there's primarily like a Jim Beam issue.
Yeah, and I've actually seen it in a town in Kentucky where it went about 2 blocks away from where the main facility is. So it's a legitimate concern. I think with this facility where I think the only thing that it would spread to after 50 years or more would be their own adjacent building. But people have done studies, it says on the internet, like distance will tell you that it's not, it's.
So that's actually where I read about it a long time ago. The discus reminded me of it, so.
They say that it doesn't cause health problems, but it's an aesthetic issue.
Mhm.
But with, even if they put 100-barrel warehouses on their property, you would not see that develop for decades, and then if it did, you wouldn't see it be really spread beyond their property unless somebody put a housing development right next to it.
What is the total number of barrels planned? The total max?
Planned in this warehouse, between 16 and 17,000 at full capacity.
And that's multiple years out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't produce it all this year.
I have another clarifying thing just for my own brain that's within your item 3 of your letter that you sent. Or I guess it's a letter. Stuck out to me that general requirement versus specific requirement. And in this case, in the case you're making, is the general the more restrictive? That you're saying that, where there's conflict between a general requirement and a specific requirement, the specific requirement shall govern, and that is that where you're pointing to the IFC? Because versus please explain that situation for the group, because to me that's is the crutch here, or
So in 5.8, I'm getting.
Yeah, sorry, I know you put your stuff away, we tricked you there.
So there's a section in the mechanical code which calls for 1 CFM per square foot, is titled Hazardous Materials General Requirements. You go down to a little bit lower to the next section, another section is titled Flammable Liquid Specific Requirements. And so with the general requirements, so because we're dealing with flammable liquids, we go down and we read the general requirements. Down in that same passage, that is 502.9.5 or section 502.9 is the general requirement, or is the specific requirements. It then refers you back to the general requirements. But that's where we find that exception that says if you're exempt from the fire code, that flammable liquid is not, that chapter in the mechanical code is not applicable. So then you go to the fire code and you find where barrels are exempt from chapters 50 and 57. Now, so that's how we track through to find use the general, the specific requirement for flammable liquid. The city and the county, their argument is that because it says 1 CFM under the general requirements, they're going to tell you that that's more specific than the specific requirements that just have the exception. But that logic is flawed, because when you read through the code, there's an order of things. So yes, first you read through the general requirements, and you read down and you read the specific requirements. And it's in the exception to 502.9.5, it exempts things that are exempt from the fire code from all of the provisions of section 502.9.5. Within that, it refers back to 502.8. So the exception is an exception to everything below it and everything that it references, which brings you back up to the 1 CFM. So that's how the exception works and how we start with the specific requirement in the section of the mechanical code is specifically for language. And I would also say that, yes, this is very confusing. It makes my head hurt too.
Definitely made mine.
And so we don't just want to base our case on what the code says, right? And in fact, when we design distilleries, where it's not a barrel warehouse, it says that you have to have the 1 CFM. We actually insist that more ventilation be provided in those situations sometimes. Because what we do is we do the math to know what's right. So we're not just relying on what the code says. I wouldn't be doing my job very well if I just followed the code by the letter without understanding its meaning and verifying whether or not it was actually going to create a safe facility. So we've proven it with the code language, we've proven it with physics and math, and now we want to prove it with this testing, which I think is, how can you lose, right? You know, we have a mechanism that if they prevent certified tests, and if it is over 25%, they stop. They don't put any more in, they take it out. It's foolproof.
Good. And with that testing too, how that, I'm guessing that a condition would need to be applied to how that's handled. So have you guys thought of who that would be, or how it would be verified? Is it a notary, or who, how would that?
We would have the facility do the testing, purchase the equipment, and then they would follow the manufacturer's directions about certifying the equipment, having it calibrated and tested. They would follow this proposed testing procedure, and where it says in that schedule that's a part of your packet, they would present this material to the county with a notarized certificate that, they're swearing upon threat of perjury that
Right.
this information is accurate.
Okay, and then is there an ASTM or some other testing standard for that kind of testing, or is there something that could be applied to that that is a standard testing for the industry, other than using the equipment?
Yeah, not that I know of, but we could look into that. I know that there are ethanol sensors, gas detectors, that can be ordered, specifically calibrated for ethanol vapor. But I don't think anyone's ever done this sort of gradual testing before. This is the first time that I propose something like this.
Yeah. I guess I meant the specific test of gathering, you need to be 2 inches from the barrel or something like that, some standard that's used.
Define methodology.
Yeah, the methodology or every time you do the test, you're 2 feet from the barrel, and you're, every 10 feet you do this test or whatever it is. I think that's best interest if that's the route that you guys go, to have that so that it's done the exact same every single time.
Yeah, Scott, may I real quick? Yeah, if we can agree on this as an approach, we will propose a methodology, a very thoughtful methodology, and what we land on will end up being a collaborative agreement. It will not be us saying this is how we're going to do it. It will be us proposing this is a best practice approach, and we'll work together to fine tune it so that it is good, it is safe, it is calibrated, it is unanimously approved to move us forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Question relative to this proposed testing. I really question and I'm not questioning your integrity at all, don't take this offense to this, but it seems appropriate that if it was agreed, the testing, initial testing, and then obviously monitoring periodically forever, because you don't want to find that, yeah, you solved the problem, but then it gets worse, or the temperatures are really strange on this planet right now. Some places are very hot, we've had a cooler summer than normal, we could have a hot summer next summer, who knows? I certainly don't begin to predict that. So I would prefer that if we talk about monitoring, that it be the testing and long-term monitoring, that it be an independent agency rather than your staff. Someone that isn't invested in the product, but rather is independent. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, my expectation for this testing is that it is, first of all, yes, I think an objective third party is a very sound and logical approach. Second, I'm confident that as we go through this round by round, it becomes an iterative methodology. Because as Scott mentioned, he's worked on hundreds of distilleries. And this is the first time he's ever recommended this strategy. First time. So my gut feel is that as we begin the testing, if that's the approach we agree to take, that excuse me, the methodology that we defined at the beginning will not be where we end up after the first year. It will be refined based on our learnings. So this, I view this as an ongoing conversation, both with the county and with an objective third party that we can agree upon doing the testing with. Because this hasn't been done in Scott's professional career, again, the first of its kind. So we're figuring this out together.
My biggest concern is that for the first steps, when we've only got 6% of the barrels in there, we won't have enough vapor to get reads. And so we might have to look for a different or custom piece of equipment that can be calibrated lower. So it's a learning process.
So, any more comments from the board or questions? So I guess we will now move to the next agenda item. Thanks, gentlemen. Invitation to the board, Building Safety Department to present ruling.
So before we recap, the schedule that the guys are talking about is in the packet that they sent you and also the mail packet, so if it's easier to look through what I sent you, it's number 182 in your packet. 182 to 186 has that entire schedule, so you can see what they're talking about. Does everybody have that?
Yes.
Just a reminder to speak into the microphones. I'm going to notice issues.
And I'm probably the guilty one.
Excuse me for being so bold. I'm going to.
No, I'm recognize, I'll just sit up more.
Pardon?
I'll just
Okay,
sit closer.
very good.
Okay, so everybody does have a copy of that schedule, you found that in your packet.
Yes.
Packet 1 or 2?
Packet 1,
It looks like this.
on page 182. If anybody does that, I can ask one of the gentlemen to go down to the office and we will make copies for you, so you'll have it for reference.
I think everyone looks to have it. Already. the front of the packet looked like this.
I'm wondering too.
But within this email set though.
Mine's on this.
Oh. Looks like we have it.
So Kurt, would you like to kind of respond to some of the questions, or would you guys like me to do just a further recap?
A recap would be great.
Okay, so as Chris's team presented, we've been working to find a resolution that didn't require coming back before you all. Part of that was the schedule here, and we did work with a third-party reviewer reviewing some of the information. So since that time, the third-party reviewer was the opposite of what they are presenting, and the county has chosen to kind of follow what the third-party reviewer is indicating. Our main hesitancy with the schedule was starting with nothing in there for ventilation. I understand why they're presenting to have nothing. It's part of the evaluation process, but that was the primary hesitancy was going with that proposed schedule.
So you mean the 6% was too low for you guys?
Yeah, we're at a disagreement from code standpoint on the 1 versus 0.06, and then we started to shift towards the scheduled option here. And that was our hesitancy in implementing that.
Okay. And the case that was made by the applicant within the attachment to the on the July 13th email, I know that, you know, this, then this, and different codes and bouncing around. The case that they're making seems to be, you know, pointing to that your interpretation is not how that reads, and what is your, I mean, I'm curious of, you know.
I'll let Kurt answer that one.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Mechanical guy.
Okay.
I guess I'll start by saying I am not an expert at listing. My job is to enforce the code. So when I look at what they submit, I don't feel it meets the code. There's sections in here too. 102.8 states that where conflicts occur between the provisions of this code and reference standards, the provisions of this code shall apply. So we're in the 2015 Michigan Mechanical Code. A lot of what he's saying, I don't, you know, we're looking at 2 pages in the book that states everything in here. We've made some mistakes in this process when we first submitted for application. We kind of approved the building so they could get started before the whole project was approved. So that's kind of where they started on the building, and then they came in with ventilation. We disapproved their ventilation. It states 502.8.1. It says indoor storage areas and storage buildings for hazardous materials in amounts exceeding maximum allowable quantity. So quantity is what is stated here. For control area shall be provided with mechanical exhaust ventilation or natural ventilation where natural ventilation can be shown to be acceptable for the materials as stored. So the original drawing that came in had windows on it that could be closed. We made the determination, since they can close the windows, natural ventilation in that scenario wouldn't be required or acceptable. We required them to put louvers in that they couldn't close. When you go into the ventilation section of the code, it talks about how much ventilation is needed, and it's like 4% of the square footage of the floor area is required for natural ventilation. So we required, some of these numbers are off the top of my head, but we required to put louvers in. And I think the rate was 800 square foot to be continuously open. we don't want a situation where, if the ethanol level gets too high and they get all the windows closed, who's gonna be the poor guy to go in there and open the windows up in that explosive atmosphere? So that's where we were at with the natural ventilation. We approved it. And this is a difficult situation. When you change one scenario in the project, it affects other areas. So when I approved the mechanical end of it, I do plumbing and mechanical. The electrical inspector went out to do an underground inspection. When you remove mechanical ventilation, the electrical has to be explosion proof. So when he went out there and since they removed the mechanical ventilation, put in natural, and you approved natural, then the electrical requirements were not satisfied. So that's kind of how it happened. It's not like we were adding on different things, they changed. So once you change one thing, it affects other things.
And in there with mechanical ventilation, does it specify manual versus passive? Meaning like you have to open a window versus a passive ventilation? Is that, was there anything?
Natural ventilation can be shown to be acceptable for the materials as stored.
Can I add to that a little bit? You know, there's what he's saying about going from the mechanical ventilation to the natural. The natural then kicks in electrical requirements for explosion proof. In the electrical code then, and in the building codes also, there's wording that says that system has to be fail-safe. That's what they say, fail-safe. Well, what's fail-safe? Okay, we're gonna rely on some poor bugger to go in there when LFLs are at 25% in open windows. How do we, you know, somebody's gotta go in there and monitor it. If there isn't any mechanical systems in there or electrical system in there to monitor it, a person's gotta go in with a handheld and monitor it. The other thing to add to this ventilation thing is that, the vapors are heavier than air, so the vapors settle to the floor. There are no windows in this building other than the door that are less than 4 feet off the floor. The vapors settle at a foot to 2 feet off the floor. So the lowest window in the building is 4 feet off the floor. The corrugation of the siding of the building is open, and there's no curving, so the building is loose. I mean, air can flow through the bottom a little bit, but as far as the windows go, nothing is less than 4 feet off the floor where our vapors settle at the floor.
And in your research, that heavy vapor, can it be moved by mechanical means? Fans? Or
Yes. At a rate of 1 CFM per square foot.
That's where we.
There's room to compromise, but I don't see on the rate. So the rates that they're proposing at 0.06 is 1,200 CFM. The rate at 1 CFM is 20,000 CFM. So the problem I have with the lower rate, and I also have a problem, they want to get out of monitoring and backup power. So at a rate of 1 CFM per square foot, monitors aren't allowed. Or monitors are not required. Sorry. There's provisions in the code that says the systems shall operate continuously unless alternate designs are approved. So the problem with the lower rate is what happens when or if the explosion level gets too high. How do you rectify it after the fact? I mean, that system has to be in place. So in my mind, the alternate way is you gotta have the 1 CFM per square foot available if it gets to that level. We can turn it off if it's under that level. But that's where your monitoring is gonna come into play. And I don't think handheld monitors work. Somebody walking around, think it has to be continuous monitoring throughout the whole entire building.
And when you're saying the code, I'm sorry, like I think there, if I'm not mistaken, there's 3 code books that we're looking at: Michigan Building Code, Michigan Mechanical Code, and International Fire Code. Is that correct, or is there others?
So we are under Michigan code. We're in Michigan, it's under Michigan code. We adopt the international code, but we make changes to it.
So just from a hierarchy standpoint, it's Michigan Building Code, Mechanical, and IFC, like below it?
Any references in those code sections too.
So
Okay.
any reference in the mechanical code that sends you to the,
IFC.
the only reason it's sending me to the international fire code is for quantities. The quantities allowed for a storage building is 120 gallons unless it's fully suppressed, which takes you to 240 gallons. And then that note 10, the exemption that they're talking about excludes the quantities. So the quantities we're talking about are 782,280 gallons at full capacity. So the International Fire Code's put me at 210 gallons unless they're in wooden barrels. So the wooden barrel exemption, in my opinion, is for the quantities being stored. If you look through all of our fire code commentaries that we sent through, it specifically states in there. Still have to worry about ventilation. The fire code is exempting out of the sheer quantity of liquid or flammable liquid they're storing.
And is that the percent that is based on full capacity with the vapor? Is that the quantity you're talking about? Like that quantity, I'm not, it's not clear, like the quantity you're talking about is what? Is
Well,
it,
they're capable of storage.
oh, the volume? Okay. Gallons of whiskey.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
the code, by code specific, the allowable storable quantity in a suppressed building, sprinkler building, is 240 gallons. So we're grossly over the MAQ, okay? So the building blows the doors off where the code is as far as storable quantity. So like Chris is saying, this is new ground for everybody. And so I believe I actually proposed monitoring, 24/7 monitoring is not in the code. But when they wanted to go to natural ventilation, I proposed putting monitoring in to help us out.
And it's a thought that monitoring, what is from that monitoring, where is what's the mechanism if it hits a certain level? Do all the windows open, or like, what do you guys
Exactly
expect?
what we're saying.
That's where we get back into the fail-safe end of this.
Mhm.
Are we relying on, all right, nobody's been in the building, all right, for 24 hours, and something major changes, we have a 110-degree day the day before, and all of a sudden our levels are above the 25%. We got one guy there with a handheld monitor to look at 20,000 square feet of building, you know, that,
Okay, and like, so fire suppression per the code is not sufficient for this Y?
no, the fire suppression is designed on the NFPA 24, it's actually ahead of the curve a little bit. The fire suppression, I think, is excellent, that's been put in the building. But that doesn't take care of the vapors,
It could explode before there's a fire. I mean, is that what you're worried about?
right, or even our fire chief's concern when I met him there was, if there's an issue there that they're called there for, how do we know our vapors aren't at an unsafe level for my firemen to go in there too, without monitoring?
Okay. What is you guys think, I think very conceptually and try to find solutions is how I work. The performance bonding for testing, be it handheld human testing and or like, continuous. Is that type, have you guys looked at that, or have you experienced that, of trying to put conditions on approval before?
We have to have a code compliant building to occupy. We are not open to letting them occupy a building until they meet the code.
And you as a group have the ability, I guess this body too, but has the ability to accept or make some type of adjustment to code based on,
I am not allowed to, I have to either, I have to agree that they meet the code. There's no alternate to the code. I have to enforce the code, that's my job.
okay, is there any state level group other than a third party consultant that could interpret their argument or, their
They
case?
can interpret whether I'm enforcing the code properly, whether I'm interpreting the code properly. That's what you're doing. We don't negotiate on the code. The codes are state legislature. It's an act of Congress that puts this book together.
Mm-hmm.
I can't vary from the code. If
Right,
they want a variance from the code, that's where they have to go and have the code changed.
right, okay.
We don't have the authority to do that.
So it's to this group to decide if their argument that, the specific or general requirement and, hopping from the MMC to the IFC is a good case or not. It's up to us.
It's your job to determine whether you believe that we're interpreting the code properly or that they are interpreting the code. That's what the record will say.
Got it. Does anybody? And Deb, I guess this is, or a question for you. After this, is there, we have the board discussion after this, but at what point could we go back and ask the applicant any additional questions, if we have them? I guess
I
so.
think that now, like, if
yeah.
you want to kind of go back and forth between us and them and have a,
Mhm.
like a larger dialogue, I think do that before you guys have your discussion and vote.
Okay. Has the applicant looked at a system that would be, you proposed the gradual, progression, and you've said that the testing is something you're open to. And you've also said that there's no such, in the history of you guys working in this industry, you don't know of another monitoring system like this. I heard that. Is there any type of monitoring system that would be 24/7 that could be put in place that had that monitor running, speaking to a computer somewhere outside of the building do you think that exists?
Those are already in existence. They're already in every propane filling station or station where they work on tanks and that is already a system that is in place in lots of places.
We have a floor plan that was drawn up by their architect. They looked into ethanol monitors that would monitor a 20-foot circle. Because of the size of the building, it would be a large cost to them. And
Got it.
the equipment's out there and available.
But with natural ventilation, there'd be no point in having monitoring unless,
There's actually more of a point with natural ventilation than if there was mechanical.
I'd like to say, if they met the requirements of natural ventilation, they do not need monitoring, but it gets back to the electrical system has to be explosion.
but what I'm suggesting that if you have windows that open and close manually, monitoring, when the monitor says you got a problem, then you've got someone going in and opening windows?
But we're not approving that.
That's my point. So that's why I'm saying monitoring with with window natural ventilation is not a solution.
I would not approve that. Right?
Windows with open louvers, louvers that were open and monitoring are kind of.
Are you talking about louvers that would be automatic if they hit a certain amount? Is that what you mean
Possibly.
by louvers?
But something that, all I'm suggesting is that windows that have to be manually opened and louvered and monitors. The monitor tells you got a problem. Now, Joe, you go in there and open the windows. That's kind of
But
not functioning.
the natural ventilation got taken off the table because the expense it would cost to electrical's done in this building,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not done explosion proof. When you take mechanical ventilation out of the equation,
Okay,
electrical's
I'm with you. So we're past that.
It's gone. It would be a huge expense to make every electrical explosion proof now.
To go non-mechanical is what you're saying.
If it went natural ventilation to make the electrical comply.
Well,
it would be expensive.
except that's,
It's an option we
Well,
would
that-
consider, yes.
yeah, so and that's the question the owner's gonna have to answer whether if they want natural ventilation, do they want to add a system? And the explosion proof.
That's a question for the applicant. Is that the system the county is mentioning? Is that the one that was the $400,000 to $500,000 add to your build cost?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm not a HVAC guy, but what will you explain, like the system that you're asking for, how it functions in the structure?
That's where I gotta be really careful because I can't ask for anything. I'm not the designer.
Okay.
I gotta be careful that I don't design a system.
Okay.
Then I'm liable. It's something they've gotta come to me.
Okay. Since the vapors are low on the ground, maybe and this is to the applicant, have you guys can you explain what the system would be, just so that we're familiar?
When we install ventilation, and the code tells us this, it tells us that we have to take the exhaust from within 12 inches of the floor and supply the makeup air, that exhaust near the ceiling in a manner so that doesn't allow any kind of eddying, so it sweeps the vapors away. So any mechanical system that we install will have exhaust drawn from low and intake.
So the intake would be ground level?
No, the intake would be, so if this room were the barrel warehouse and we were gonna ventilate it because vapor is down here near the floor, we would have an exhaust duct that sucks from here. And then we would over in the other quarters have like that vent would then be the supply.
And by intake, I apologize, there would be the exhaust, or what's pulling from the existing air in the building
Yes.
would be down towards the ground, and then the new air would be coming up from up high. Okay.
Well, now, your exhaust, you have to supply intake air for every amount of exhaust air you send out.
I
So
understand.
it's not recirculating.
That's correct.
And then you have to also make sure that the airflow is evenly across the whole floor. So what he's describing as up high and down low is creating airflow across the floor.
Mm-hmm. And does that create, from the applicant standpoint, that extra airflow, does that accelerate evaporation from the tanks? Is that why that?
If you have too much of that, if you have too much of that extra airflow, then it accelerates evaporation, dries out the wood, changes the profile of the whiskey at X that causes the bills to get closed.
Okay. Does anybody else on the board have questions for the building safety department?
I just want to clarify something. It's my understanding of our role, of our ability to do anything here is basically determine whether the building department is correct in their findings or the building department is incorrect in their findings and the owner's proposal is acceptable.
I'd like to speak on that. And I think there's a third possibility. And it's provided by section 113.1 of the Michigan Building Code, which speaks about the authority of the Construction Board of Appeals. And you also have the opportunity and ability to approve an equal or better form of construction that's proposed by the applicant. So it's not just whether they're right or we're right.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is whether whether the building department is correct in what they're asking for, or you're correct in what you're proposing.
But it's twofold is what he's saying, because they came here with two things. One, either we misinterpreted the code at one, and they should be closed, or six, or the proposal they're getting with the schedule, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, is an equal or better form of construction,
Okay, which
which is essentially in the form of a variance, which you have the authority.
an
to
equal,
grant.
I'm not sure it's a different form of construction. I think it's a different form of monitoring the construction.
It's a condition on the construction.
It also says the Board of Appeals shall not have authority relative to interpretation of the administration of this code, nor shall the board be empowered to waive requirements of this code. So we go back to that. It's not a matter of your way of monitoring it. It's a way whether what you're proposing is compliant with the code or not compliant with the code.
The code also has language regarding alternative means and methods of engineered systems. So if you were to approve the monitoring system, which then you would be in compliance with the code's language that provides for just these special circumstances.
Okay, and when you're saying monitoring system, are you talking about an installed monitoring system or a periodic monitoring system by staff or outside agency?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. When you approve the gradual barrel loading program that we're proposing, which is an alternative that assures that it ensures safety. When you approve that, you will be doing so. You don't have to say the county's right. You don't have to say we're right. You just have to say we're going to approve this based on what Ethan stated your powers are and the code language that you will be basing that on in compliance with the code is the language that talks about alternative methods and engineered solutions. That's what we're talking about, is a specially derived solution here, which the code allows, which isn't spelled out in black and white, but we're asking, I think, would the county be asking them to agree to this also, to approve once and for all that whether or not, how much ventilation we need, because we do measure the neighbors.
I think it would have to be worded specifically, just because time has changed a little bit. And we've talked, as you guys noted here today, there would need to be additional dialogue between my department and from you guys on that. I wouldn't say we would blanket approve the schedule, but I think that's what we're talking about, yes.
I think what Scott's referring to, and you do have the authority in section 104.11 called Alternative Materials Design Methods of Construction Equipment. It says the provisions of this code are not intended to prevent the installation of any material or to prohibit any design or method of construction not specifically prescribed by this code, provided that any such alternative has been approved. An alternative material design or method of construction shall be approved where the building official provides that the proposed design is satisfactory and complies with the intent of the code. So you have an opportunity to determine whether what we're proposing is an equal form of or better form of construction if it complies with the intent of the code. And the intent of the code here is to have a safe building, which we all.
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
But I disagree with what you would give us the power to come up with that, because I don't believe we have that. We have the ability, if you have a disagreement on something, to resolve that, to accept or one side or the other. We don't have the ability by the code to come up with some, we're not mediators.
Well, I understood, and we're not asking you to be. This was an alternative method of construction we proposed to the building official, which you have the ability to approve or disapprove of.
Correct, that's what he's saying, is that falls back under your authority. There's two things here that we've made a decision on. And it's under your authority to say, we disagree with the decision made by the building department, and we will authorize that you guys move forward in working towards compliance under this alternative method that they've proposed. There are two things on the table that we have made a decision on. That's what you're for today. If I'm stating this correctly.
You are.
So your position on, if you can state the building department's, building official's position on this, because we've now muddied it enough that I'm not quite clear on where you stand on this.
So we would require the 1 CFM versus the 0.06. Our code path differs on that. With regards to the proposal, we also did not approve that. And our reasoning for that was starting with nothing. We didn't want to start with nothing. We wanted something, more than just handheld monitoring. Due to the size of the building, we would ask that there be some kind of baseline that we could come forward together on, rather than starting with nothing and handheld monitoring. That was our reason for saying that.
And then we have the issue of explosion-proof electrical with the natural ventilation.
Correct. The ventilation issue is the big question,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have our other issues underneath that.
Yeah. So and Traverse City Whiskey is proposing natural ventilation.
They're not. They're proposing mechanical. Natural ventilation is no longer on the table, right? Yes. Mechanical ventilation is what we're here for today. We're discussing two things, the rate, 1 versus 0.06, and then this proposed schedule, and what that would look like if you were to approve that for Chris's team and my team to work together in that path.
And just to be clear, the mechanical they're proposing is 0.06, and you guys want the mechanical to be 1.0.
Could the mechanical ventilation that you're proposing to put in, would it be capable of doing what it could? Can it run at a rate that would get to 0.6 or the 1?
No.
So it's not a variable speed motor that can manage that range.
There's no variable speed motor that can manage that rate of range. Fans can.
So you'd be sizing it for 1 and then dialing it down for .06.
Yeah, I don't think they would even work at that low speed because the balloon has to, motor of the fan has to be within a certain.
It wouldn't be efficient, obviously.
Yeah, you would probably.
You can't
Somebody
make-
speak into the microphone because we're having difficulty hearing.
The answer to the gentleman's question is no.
Okay. I mean, I'll admit, I'm an architect, I am not a mechanical engineer, so,
You're an architect?
yes. Since 1973. When I got my license.
The problem we have with what's proposed is the wide range between the 1 CFM and the .06. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if there was a problem, there's no means of correcting it without an explosion happening. If the level gets above, I mean, it's, the approach they're taking is let's wait and see. And codes don't work that way. We look for fail safes. If there is a problem, I'm not a whiskey connoisseur, I don't know the business. But if there is a mechanical problem, we need a way to rectify it without somebody getting in danger or building going.
Totally agree.
And then
Have
the
you
other
ever
thing,
designed as an architect a distillery? What did you design when you were an architect?
I'm not going to go through my resume, but yes, I've worked on a bonded warehouse for Hiram Walker many years ago.
How much ventilation did you have there?
It's been long enough ago, I couldn't remember the specs, okay?
Of course not.
And that's not my role here. And I'm not going to go through my resume.
So, but I maybe this point has been beat to death at this point, but I just want to make clear, there's another section of code, 104.10, that says where there are practical difficulties involved in carrying out the provision of this code, the building official shall have the authority to grant modifications for individual cases upon the application of the owner or the owner's authorized agent, provided that the building official shall find that the special individual reason makes the strict letter of this code impractical. The modification is in compliance with the intent and the purpose of the code, such that the modification does not lessen health, accessibility, life, and fire safety or structural requirements. So.
And the life safety is the big issue here.
Right, and I'm just saying there is some, you have the authority to do what we're asking you to do. If you find that what we're asking you to do meets with the life safety intent of the code.
And that's the big question.
That's the big question.
we're not disagreeing. We do have the ability to accept an alternate design, but we don't agree with the alternate design that they're proposing.
I hear what you're saying. I mean,
We're not disagreeing that we have the authority for that. We just don't believe it's that.
Last October, when we last discussed this, I hoped that building department and the design team and the owner could come up with some reasonable approach that was acceptable to both sides.
The laws of physics haven't changed since then.
Pardon me?
The laws of physics haven't changed since
No,
then.
I understand the laws of physics haven't changed. Nor has your attitude.
I'm wondering if, for the clarity of all involved, if there's any graphic representation of how it would work, meaning any drawings, the air comes in here and it goes out here, if that would help anybody here understand. I feel I understand it. I truly think that there is a pathway forward. The provisions that have been mentioned, but I can save that for the discussion. But I really, from my professional background, if projects are stamped, backed by general professional liability, performance bonding, and things like that, generally they go forward. But, that's, it's not, I personally do not have experience with, explosive potential, but a lot of different levels of architectural and, projects and buildings. But the overall, I think that what I have here, if there's a, code path defined, which is here, but, this, it's in here, but I think that's defined and agreed upon by both parties, noting that all general liability, like what is the insurance levels and the performance bonding, and the conditions of that bonding, then clearly defining or any methods for removing of excess vapor. That's the one thing that it's not clear to me, is like, what if it does read over the allowable amounts? How does that vapor leak?
So, we proposed a gradual, we proposed putting 6% of barrels. That's about 1,000 barrels. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that it would be dangerous to put 1 barrel inside this warehouse?
I don't know, where is it located? Because it's not just that explosion, you have other items there that could explode.
So, well, is everybody familiar with how an internal combustion engine works?
Pardon me?
Are you familiar with how an internal combustion engine works? You have to have air, fuel, and the right mix. Right. So that's what this principle is based upon, is that we won't have an explosion unless we have sufficient fuel in the fuel-air mixture. So if your car won't start in the morning, an old carburetor car, that's because you're not getting enough fuel, okay? So you choke it, cuts down the air, you get more fuel. So what I'm saying is, in a 20,000 square foot building, if we put 1 barrel of 53 gallons of whiskey in the middle of that building with no ventilation or whatever, and there's no power source near it or anything, does anyone imagine that would explode or create any kind of risk to anyone? Is there anyone here who thinks that would be a dangerous thing?
You talking about spontaneous combustion?
Do you think that spontaneous combustion?
That's what I'm asking, is that what you?
No. We're not concerned with spontaneous combustion. What we're concerned with here is if there's enough vapor in the air in the building and there's a spark of some sort. So the logic behind this gradual loading thing is that, I think, even if we don't acknowledge it, we all know that there's some small amount of barrels that, I can put one in here with all the lights and everything, and we're not going to have enough vapor to make the problem. So, although I have provided a verifiable calculation, we're offering to put that 1 barrel. We'll sniff it and make sure, it's very little vapor, 2 barrels, up to 6%. So it's a way, I know it's not necessary. I know that this will work if we fill it immediately, but that's because I have a lot of experience with them. I've been to these things and I've designed them. But it's not about what I know here, it's about what the community feels comfortable with. I went this morning and had breakfast at a farm to table, what was the name of that place?
And Dean rooms.
It's right down the road, 9 Dean Road. And it just was exciting to be there in that community. And that's what these folks want to create. They're not going to sell croissants, but, you know, they're going to sell cocktails and so forth. So I think, you know, no one really responded to the rhetorical question about one barrel. So I think that we can probably all agree that one is not going to cause a problem. And rather than install thousands of dollars worth of fans to put that one barrel in and then increase the number of barrels, all to just learn that we didn't need the fans, this is a way together that you can be sure and not have any risk. I mean, if someone shoots a gun at it or something, you know, there's always what if. If lightning strikes twice in the same place. But that's the principle here, is that, you know, we have not enough fuel in the fuel air mixture, and we just want you to prove it. Let us prove it.
The problem I see with that method is that if you find a problem, what is the cost of rectifying that problem? And can you do it?
Yes, and here's how. So when we're doing our testing, let's say we put the first 1,000 barrels in there. We're going to set a limit that is, so the code limit is 25% of the lower flammable. The lower flammable limit is, for alcohol vapor, is 3% of the air fuel mixture. So the code requires us to stay at a quarter of that, 0.8%. Okay, so even if we were at the code limit, we've still got, you know, a 75% cushion. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, as we're gradually loading this, if we get 10%, if we put 1,000 barrels in there and we get 10% of the LFL, we are still 90% below where we could have an explosion. We're 15% below what the code requires. We're going to react to that problem. We're going to, so we're going to react and go, oh, we hit 10%. Those things come out. We put fans in, we stop, we reevaluate.
I see no problem with that part of it. When you put multiple barrels, other things are going to change. And I don't know how you resolve that problem.
So when we put the multiple barrels in, you're right, things will change. So the airflow will be a little bit different because the barrels will be blocking it, for instance.
You're limiting it to the barrels themselves. I would consider the problems with the electrical system too.
So the code actually says that you don't have to have explosion-proof electrical if you can maintain below 25% of the lower flap limit. So it's back to that principle of the internal combustion engine. If you know, well, you can have a spark in the electrical, but that spark is not going to ignite any fuel-air mixture because there's not enough fuel in the fuel-air mixture. So that's what this is all about, is making sure that these barrels don't put enough fuel into that fuel-air mixture. So, and if we start and we're, you know, maybe we get to half the thing filled, and we come to 10% of the LFL. At that point, we're going to look and we're going to say, if we're producing vapor at this rate, now we can predict that if we add 1,000 more barrels, now we know we have to do something, and then we're going to do something, which would be to put in some ventilation and bring that down to under 10% of the LFL. So I'm confident that these readings, I know how they're going to turn out. I know that we're not going to reach that 10% of the LFL. But let's prove it. I would love to learn from this, and I would hope that others here also would like to learn the truth.
I would love to do that too, because that was my job in the past, experimentation. We're not talking about experimentation here, we're talking about trying to prove a concept. And if it doesn't work, what do?
Then you stop doing the thing that doesn't work.
Then you can't build this facility.
He would,
Well, hold on, let me just put very bluntly. We've done this engineering study to support what we're saying. We know the code inside and out. We have a different interpretation of the code. That's fine. But what we're saying and what Scott's saying is we will continue to take, to complete regular testing on the environment. And if we identify a problem, which we know we won't, but if we do, we are committed to invest in a ventilation system that rectifies the problem.
I have no side on whether it's ventilated mechanically or ventilated naturally. I just want to make sure we have a safe system.
It sounds like we want the same thing.
And I'm sure we do.
There's a comment back there.
Hi, I'm a building inspector for the county also. We keep talking about one barrel in a room. I don't think you folks have seen this building, if you were lucky enough. It's impressive. It's enormous. We're not talking about one barrel, we're talking about 16,000 barrels. Okay, so this vapor is not one barrel, it's 16,000 barrels. We've got an enormous amount of able share that's produced or given off, or however we state that.
where are the barrel warehouses that you've been in?
That's Scott. Please.
I've never been in a barrel house except for this one. It hasn't had a barrel in it. So I have no experience with a barrel house full, but I've seen building. And when it's full, it's gonna be full. I mean, it's impressive. So this talk of airflow, LVL, explosion proof, we gotta think of the worst thing that can happen. That's what we're all worried about.
And
We're proposing some things in small increments to try and experiment,
Learn.
experiment, how to mitigate a potential problem. And then we're asking the people that are gonna do it, it's like asking a fox to guard the chicken house. I mean, their vested interest is in their product, which I get, that's their businesses. So we gotta be really careful the way we're thinking about this. This isn't one barrel, it's 16,000 barrels, it's an enormous building. We don't have one of these buildings in Michigan of this magnitude. I'm sure there's some we don't know about. They're not this big. So, we wanna be careful about what we're talking about here. We've got, as a building code person, I have to think about the worst case scenario all the time. I have to think about structural integrity, which the building is fine. It's a wonderful building. I have to think about occupants, public safety. That's another thing, just as important. So I'd like to keep that in mind. We hear a lot of plans that could possibly mitigate this, but we have to go by what it says in the book. We don't get to pick and choose and change how we look at things because a building is either inconvenient for the people building it. Our ultimate goal is structural safety and occupant safety. for the people in the building and the people around the building.
Is there any other comment from the building safety department or questions for them?
I would just say, everybody today has made really good points, okay? I feel like every time we talk about this, I know what we're talking about, and then I hear things, and I start to question myself, as Scott and others today have said.
Okay. Well, we will move on to the next agenda item. Is that how you want to go?
You have the ability, Mr. Chairman, if you want to take a brief 5-minute break if the board so needs a
Sure. Just,
moment.
I want to ask this gentleman, what are the faults that you would see of the approach proposed?
There's a few things that come to my mind, and it's when we approve the building, we got to look at the total capacity. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Once we give them occupancy, they've got the occupancy for the total capacity.
What's approved capacity?
Yeah, all the stuff. Unless they remove bricking and stuff, the capacity's there.
We would have to change what we do, there would either be stipulations on there, or if we were to go with the schedule, it would have to be a temporary. Temporaries are only good for 60 days, they're renewable, and as time went on, we would have to modify it. I don't know how, given the way it's permitted, we would be able to give full occupancy and then do other permits for partial.
And the other parts of it would be, it's a wait and see game where we're talking about explosions here. So if there is a problem, we need an elevated way that somebody's not gonna enter an explosion building to rectify it manually. It's gotta be automatic. So alternative designs is gonna have to require not handheld monitor by employee.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotta be fail-safe. And it's gotta have backup power. I can't tell them to do that.
So
They have to come to me with it.
Can I just, I want to make one thing very clear. Nobody in this room today, or in what Scott has prepared, is suggesting that there would be handheld monitoring by an employee. That's off the table.
So on our end,
Let me-
we're waiting for something to be proposed.
May I finish? What we've talked about today, this is the most relevant point to react to what you're saying, is that we as a group, as a team, would agree on an objective third party who can support this project going forward. We would agree on periodic testing. We would do this together. We're not talking about a TC Whiskey employee. We're talking about a credible person who has experience in this to help us at our expense. That's what we're talking about. So
I think monitoring has to be continuous. I don't think periodic testing. Stuff changes all throughout the day. We get 50-degree days here, swings. And I'm not an expert in whiskey, but if we're talking about monitoring, to get out of a different requirement of a code, it's got to be constant.
Well, sure, and a different way to think about it could be, and again, back to what Ethan mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, testing under the most extreme circumstances. Find the least ideal day for us, from a vapor standpoint, to test. Let's stress test it and make sure that everything is safe in that moment. Or whenever. It could be random. I'm just saying, there's a lot of ways to think about this. I hear what you're saying about this continuous piece.
There's no code regarding monitoring. It's not in the code.
There is a conversation amongst us as a team, as a group, to find a path to move forward. That is an option. That's actually partially why we're here.
Is there third-party companies out there that even do that?
I heard today, I heard one.
That's a building monitor.
He sells designs. I don't know if he does
There are companies, third-party companies that can come out and monitor.
That's stuff we're willing to entertain that has not been presented. I mean, the stipulation has been, this is all we're proposing. We've been waiting for something more than what you're giving us.
Not to contradict that, but I believe some of that may have been dialogue with the third-party reviewer at times that we were not present.
What I'm saying is that your third-party reviewer is their company, is the company that
He did mention
He is.
that, yeah, and he did mention he's
Don't
got
know.
some competitors.
I don't think we would
No,
want to
no,
use
we would
that.
have to use someone different, yes.
Yeah. So, one of two things is gonna happen, right? You put on 1 CFM per square foot of ventilation and do what you said, and have it not turn on unless the sniffer tells it to turn on. At that point, that ventilation will operate for years and years and years without ever turning on. And we will have proven that it works with just the windows. Another thing that happen is that rather than wasting that money on all that ventilation, is that we can do this gradual installation. And then we can prove that it works with just the windows.
And devil's advocate, invest where it makes sense.
That's right, if it doesn't, all right? I'll eat my hat if it doesn't, but if it doesn't, then yes, we'll know exactly where and what to do. We're not just,
We already have we've already invested in an engineering study to support what we're saying, to support if there were an issue where it would be, and the study suggests that it is not a thing. However, back to the math and physics, if something changes, if there's a variable that changes that requires additional ventilation, we're prepared to invest in that.
May I interject something? We're talking about design and development engineering here. You're proposing how to do something, you don't know if it's gonna work, but you're putting a lot of resources into developing something. You don't know yet what it is, or if it ever will work.
I do though, and I know that I have worked with hundreds of building and fire code departments across this country. And I have a very good reputation as a specialist. And this is the first time I've ever not been able to convince a department to look at the calculations and read the code. So I don't know why that's happening, maybe my personality, just I work here, but I know it will work because I've done the calculations, as you would have done in your career, right? You do calculations, you know this is going to work, right? You know it. And then. But it doesn't always. That's right. Every now and then it doesn't. So that's why we're willing to have this experiment to verify the hypothesis. And what I'm telling you is that we know that we could have an explosion if we reach 100% of the lower level. We're going to do testing and we're going to stop what we're doing and make changes if we reach just 10%.
I'm preferring the discussions we're having here versus the discussions we would have after a tremendous accident occurred.
Me too. And, nowhere, none of Alcuda's projects have ever had any sort of fire, explosion, safety-related problem. You hear about them, and I don't ever want to have one of ours be used for that. And honestly, as a businessman, that's more important to me.
Anything else, and then we can maybe take a 7 or 8 minute break up to 11:15. Is that enough, or do you want more? Let's take a brief break till 11:15, and then we'll start back with, agenda, guys.
So you can do that under board discussion.
So we're going to move on to board discussion. And do you want to, Deb, start out, or would you like us to wait for your statement?
My role here is just totally to be support. It's
Okay.
not to in any way make a determination. So just trying to assist the board as possible. So
Okay.
I think there have been some great points made, some suggestions made from both on things that could be done to move forward. I think from that point, I think the chair has a pretty good idea of what some of those things are
Yep.
for the board to discuss. So I think that's kind of.
Sure. So as we've been talking about this, everyone, this is just, my path forward, I guess, is I really think that it's a good project. I think that the applicant has personally given a path forward, a suggestion. I think the county, we know what the disagreement is the interpretation of the code, I guess. It's where we're at. So I think the path forward would be something coming from the applicant with a clear path forward of how the testing would work is what I'm suggesting for us to discuss. Something that outlines the general professional liability levels that are on here, any suggestions of bonding that may or may not be available to you guys, that would help with the cover to make sure that if the testing hypothetically, if the barrels go in and the levels go over, what happens? If you don't put in the ventilation that you say you will in the beginning, is the performance bond going to cover that? Or what's the policing power of the county at that point? And I just clear method for if those excess levels, if it's hit, even though the professional on your team has said that he believes it's never going to hit over 25%. What happens if it does? Very clearly, when there's no ventilation in place. I think it needs to be written out, agreed to by all parties. And then if the ventilation to reduce it back down to where it needs to be is not put in, maybe you guys specify it'll be put in within X amount of time. Here's the plan, because I know that you guys don't want to waste any time, and the county won't want to waste any time of performing and getting that put in. Like, what do? Do you remove existing barrels, keep doors open, do whatever it is? I think that everyone's going to want to know that. Signage and any warning signals that might need to be there is another thing that I put in my notes, is just suggestions. While may or may not already be required by code, I don't know. But open flames, signage on every door and every corner of the building, whatever it is, to make sure there's no sparks. I don't know what that would be. And then I also think that it is working closely with the county on this one is like the policing power of it. I don't know. I know you guys are limited in time and capacity, but what happens if you guys stop doing the monitoring? Is that breach of contract of performance or stop of production? I don't know. So those are really where hopefully there's some path forward to get these guys operational. And that's really where I'm at. And I hope I understand there's a lot of potential danger here. I'm not trying to push it through. I just think that in my personal life, and I know we have some architects here, at a certain point you have to trust the stamp is what I do in my job. Is trust, and then, but at the same time, you can't compromise the county or the safety of the people working at the facility. But that's my 2 cents.
I just don't know how you stop the program in the middle of all this testing, essentially. It's as simple as that.
I think maybe it'd be an agreement. If they hit the levels, they do X.
That's fine.
I mean, that's,
Question I would have, and I don't have the answer at all, so this isn't rhetorical. If you put 1,000 barrels in there and they test fine, great. If you put 1,000 barrels in there and it doesn't test fine, what construction can we do and how can we do it to correct it without putting do we remove those barrels? Because if you've got vapors, you're not going to be coming in there and doing construction that's going to potentially spark those vapors, obviously. So how do you physically, logistically correct something if there is a problem?
Our position is to not get,
I think you probably need to move up to the table. I can hear you, but I'm not sure that she's going to get a recording.
and we may have to step outside to just get a kind of group reaction. However, our position is not to get to a limit and then react. Our position is to test in such an iterative way that we can react before we get anywhere
I
near.
understand you're not going to get to the maximum point. I didn't mean to
Not
imply
even
that.
maximum point. I mean, the point behind the testing, behind the learning.
If you see it approaching there.
Yes, exactly. Where we can react safely without,
Okay, and then the question in my mind becomes, what is that magic number? Yes, I understand that you identify that there's an issue at 3%, and I'm just using numbers. I'm not a distillery designer, as has been pointed out. But if we got to a magic number and we recognize there is an issue, can we do everything construction-wise that we'd have to do at that point without putting someone in danger? It's 90 degrees today, it's not, but if it was 90 degrees and we got the problem at 90, can we guarantee it's not going to be 100 and the number's not going to go up tomorrow? So by the time that we've initiated the fix, whatever that fix might be, are we now at a higher number and we've got a problem? It's a question. I don't have the answer. That's a concern.
understood.
Because you're not going to want to move barrels back out, I assume.
The benefit of approaching this in an iterative way is that it allows us to back out to what we've identified as a safe zone, so to speak, because we know that in a different moment in time. Well, you can want to speak to this.
So the question is, if we discover that we're approaching a flammable level, what is our reaction to correct it so that it does not reach the flammable level?
And how quickly can you implement it?
We can do that very quickly. So I'll lay out several options. So there will be an immediate response, which would be opening doors and putting in portable fans, which of course is not something that's ideal. But we're talking about a surprise here. surprised and put 1,000 barrels in, and we've gotten to 25% of the lower final limit already. We don't want to wait for it to go up 10 degrees tomorrow and have it go above that. So we take immediate action by putting some temporary fan in, and take further immediate action by actually, yes, removing some of those barrels. Okay?
And where would you put those?
We will put them outside.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
the right answer.
Yeah, we would.
I didn't know whether we were just moving the problem somewhere else.
Yeah.
I hope you weren't.
No, they're not gonna go into another building and make it worse. So if this happens, okay, if we see, if during this experiment, we do see numbers like this that, you know, geez, 1,000 barrels, we're already at 25% of the lower. This doesn't work. Out come the barrels, temporary fans, in goes, you know, just get permanent ventilation to correct the problem.
At 25%, which I've already discussed with them, portable fans are not an option. Those electric motors create the source of ignition at 25%.
Well, actually, you have to have 100% of the LFL for an ignition source to ignite.
As far as the electrical code says, it has to be 25% explosion. That's where I would draw my numbers down, is in the book, in the construction code, or in the code. That's where it calls. That's where it calls for it has to be explosion.
So that's true. The code does say if we reach 25%, we have to have explosion proof. So here's our, so we may be okay because we don't have, because we're only at 25%, but we're not in compliance with the code. We must we continue to be in compliance with the code throughout this entire process. So we set that standard at 10% or 15%. If we put 1,000 barrels in and we test 10% of the LFL, then we take our immediate action, and part of that could be the temporary ban, moving barrels out, and so forth. So we're going.
So your trigger point would be at a much safer level.
Yeah, we're gonna make our trigger point much safer. Yeah.
Where are you gonna conduct this experiment?
Yeah.
Are you gonna conduct that in the building that you're constructing, or is this off on another site?
The building's already built,
Sure that.
and so we just want to, the only thing left to do is start putting the barrels on, so. And, yeah, you can come see the building, I'm sure.
What is this, the step process, the delayed grand opening? What is it going to do to your issue of your racks and the warpage and twisting?
Every day that we wait here,
Mm-hmm.
the wood racks continue working.
So it's not, I mean, ideally, they would load them up as much as possible to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
But loading them up at first 1,000 is going to be a better situation than leaving no weight on them.
Okay, so that brings a question in my mind, and I apologize for as many questions as I've got, but as is pointed out, I'm not a distillery guy. The 1,000 barrels, when we get to 1,000 barrels, are they distributed on one level? Are they racked up? How are they? Because that obviously, in fact, determines the concentration of the vapor collection.
Yeah. Haven't looked exactly at how many ricks and spaces in the ricks that number of barrels will fill up. But I would imagine, and Chris might have a different plan and might need to, changes, but, I would imagine they would begin, at one end, putting the barrels on the bottom row and fill the bottom level first. But we may need to talk to the abusive people that built the rigs. Exactly. That's what you were going to say. And see if they recommend us, stacking, putting 1,000 on one end, or. But
but I mean, you agree that that would impact the potential concentration of fumes?
It would, yeah.
So I think it's an important question that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so wherever the barrels go, we're going to be, whether they're all grouped at one end, which would theoretically create a more concentrated amount, or whether they're spread out, which also could theoretically create more because it's all near the ground.
Yeah.
We're gonna measure it no matter what. So we're gonna set that, 10 or 15% of the LFL. I'd say 10%. Let's just say that 10% of the lower flow limit. Wherever we put these barrels, if at any place in that building we start sniffing that, then we stop, open doors, fans, remove barrels.
I think the guy back there has been waiting.
Yep.
I think any sort of limit you set on there that you have to rectify to get the LFL levels down has to be automatic, not portable fans. It's gotta be something somebody can turn on. You're talking 1,000 barrels. It happens on the 4th of July. Everybody's on vacation. I don't think one guy is gonna be able to move 1,000 gallons, 1,000 barrels out of a warehouse before. I think it has to be an automatic, not plugging in fans.
We will have done our testing before the 4th of July, so well before a holiday hits like that, we will have had 1,000 barrels in and have had multiple tests over weeks to know what that is.
I don't think portable fans is a proven method.
All right, thanks, you guys. I think we need to try to keep this as a board discussion. We appreciate it. If the board needs to ask questions, we can, but we need to talk amongst ourselves what is being suggested. The key here, I guess I'll open it up. I can say this. Anybody else has, go ahead.
I would like to see a solution. And I think we've had too much talk. I think that I would like, I think it would be correct to have a written solution more than I've heard a lot of, we're gonna. We're not, it doesn't leave the board here anything to evaluate. So I would like to see a solution to it. Everybody's got a lot of time into this. But I can't vote for a solution that says we're gonna. And so I couldn't vote for or against it because I've been involved where code things weren't the best solution because code things try to cover every possible solution, and it's difficult for codes to work. But I honor codes and I respect codes. Being an architect over 60 years, that's what you do. Respect the code. So my comments are, put something in right. I would not vote to approve or disapprove this today. I would see that there is a potential for a solution, but I haven't seen it in writing.
Got a comment?
No comment? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, just one more, and I would agree with what John is saying, that I think it'd be appropriate. I mean, yes, you have a timeline here and all that, that's all changed. And I think we kind of flexed this, warped it a little bit through the discussion today, that if, as the owner, you redo this document, what we kind of arrived at now, do a new direction for it, a new outline with some dates, but recognizing that there's going to be some flex in that. And that we, as much as I don't like to see it, we meet again and so whatever timeline that you can propose, that you can have the document ready and that we resolve it then. Because I agree with John, I'd be hard put to know what I was voting on right now. Because there seems to be enough vagary about it, and then we tie it down more specifically. And I'm not talking about October to August again, or to July or whatever. It's like, if we can agree that, some timeline that you'd have it done in whatever you declare you can have it done, and then we try and meet then.
I had it done at the end of the day.
I'd like to say I agree with Bob, having been involved in construction, construction time is money. And you have money out there and the interest rates on it's stacking up. So I'd meet next week if something positive was presented.
Yes, I agree. I could also be available next week. The key issue, one thing that I did realize here is, for those that are been working with various, different types of industries here, is the 25% max of the vapor, I forget what the acronym is if the spark is at 100%, that's a 3 or 4x safety factor, is that correct?
The code builds in a 3 or 4x safety.
Which is significant, that, I think, I'm not the COVID, that's significant. We're working with 1.5, 2x in my world for structural capacity of rooftops and stuff. But that's just something I wanted to point out that I caught there. So the key issues here that I think that would help the group, I know for me to be able to vote too, well, I guess I'm not voting since I'm recusing myself, but I think a votable situation would be a gradual installation approach of the barrels, as you guys have already laid out a time frame, but an updated one along with a few other things. But gradual installation approach with new updated targeted dates, with a hazard plan is something that I added to the note I have here. So the July 4th situation, or, the danger level, where that is, if you guys are backing that 25% down to 10% or 5% or whatever it is, note that and make it clear so that it's clear to any reader that it's below the maximum. Consideration of partial occupancy, 60-day increments during the agreed upon process of loading the building. Performance bond to ensure that the owner is committed to establishing a third-party monitoring of the ventilation, and a commitment to rectifying an issue if such would occur and or is identified, to include a redesign of the ventilation as needed. And then, I would add on to here any other protection mechanisms, no smoking signs or whatever.
That's cool.
Oh, let's go. Okay. Yeah, but any plan that you guys have to police yourselves, I guess, of getting this to be a votable item. With me out and two that said they don't feel they have a voted item and the others haven't spoken, that there's no majority there. already. But I could be committed. I want to see this get to a vote personally, and I can make myself available next week as well.
I certainly want to see you able to move ahead. And I hope anything I've said hasn't been construed as being against your project, because I'm very much in favor of your project going into the county. I'm going to just throw out another thought, if I may, relative to the spreading the barrels out or stacking them. And I've not been in the building, I've looked at the drawings, so I recognize this would be difficult, but if we built a relatively tight, say this queen screen to segregate one area and stacked it the way it would ultimately be, I'd ask that you consider that as a possibility. I'm getting a real test.
That sounds like an interesting idea. You're thinking that by doing that, we would essentially fill a smaller warehouse and get a test that would predict what a larger warehouse would.
What the eventual would be.
No, I like that. I like that idea. I think that there's a good place for that. You know, if we could just pull that down,
Yeah, a temporary, not any kind of permanent or expensive partition, but something that would zone it off.
Yeah, I'll look at the building and see if there's an interesting. It would get us our data faster.
And it would get you maybe more reliable data rather than some, consider it.
And I think a suggestion too is with this plan, if you guys maybe can come with a suggestion of what the third party, like the, I guess, established third party or who you think that would be really important. So, is that all board comments? Okay, where's my agenda here? So the decision, the decision is, Deb, help me out here, like, what should I do
I
here?
think the decision would be to postpone a meeting.
9 o'clock next Tuesday.
I wouldn't put it that way. I would say ask for
I may have
Okay,
suggestions.
all right.
proposal.
Sure.
I don't know, if this, I don't think I can even make a motion, but my suggestion would be, since there were two parts to the application, one about a determination of which was the correct standard, and then second was the alternative plan. I don't know if the board would entertain a vote on the first part, so we can just kind of settle that, because it is a really which standard applies. And then I'd say the meeting should be adjourned as to the second half and reconvene when the board sees fit.
Get tabled and then the meeting adjourned.
Yeah,
Are you gonna put forward a proposal?
yeah.
What's he saying?
Let's get that in as quickly as possible.
So you're suggesting that we vote on what? I'm sorry?
Well, the first part is that we do believe there's a misinterpretation of the code and the correct standard is the 0.06 CFM per square foot.
I think, how I understood it earlier was we either choose to say that is, the standard is the 0.06 or the 1.0, or we decide to come up with another.
No, there's two issues, like he's letting you guys know now. The first one is gonna be at 1 or 0.06, and then it sounds like we're gonna table the second option until next week.
Right.
So he's asking you to make a decision today on the ventilation rate, unless you guys don't want to do that. That's what we're asking you to do.
Right.
Make a decision on making a decision.
And Amber, does the decision, when the vote does happen, do we need to decide on that, or could we give an alternative with a suggested plan for testing?
As far as this first element we're talking, the rate,
The whole process, I guess.
there's two avenues here. We're asking you guys to make a decision as far as the ventilation rate. If you don't feel comfortable deciding that today, then we would want to table both issues until
Got it.
next week. We're gonna meet.
I think it'd be reasonable to table both issues.
Yes.
If you figure out a plan,
That it may,
it may address itself.
So we would need a motion to table.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until a future date. Let's, rather than say next Tuesday, within a reasonable time after we see your proposal. Because we should see it before and have a chance to study it a little bit before the meeting.
Good point. That's a good point, Bob.
We need a support for that.
Let's narrow it down to those two items and not get caught off with other things on the plans that you brought up.
So I believe, Molly, we have a motion and a support to table.
Who supported?
John did.
John?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't want to speak for you, I'm sorry.
And I just, so that's, motion passes.
I'd take a vote, just.
Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? One opposition. All right, motion carries. I do want to let it be known, I do have a conflict from August 16th through the 24th. I am not available, so if it's in your interest, you guys, to do it before then, because I won't be available. We probably won't have quorum without me here, right?
Could anybody else speak to if they have any conflicts too, just so I'll be aware of those?
I'm retired.
I remember this approximately be this about the same time.
Yeah, we'll do 9 o'clock again, as long as that works for you all.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, we get our,
Like if it was late in the afternoon.
Let's say tentatively, just so we make sure that that's gonna work with everybody, but I don't see any issue. So you tell me your Tuesday. So let's say tentatively, second week of this session.
second is Wednesday. My anniversary.
You better remember that.
The answer better.
Well, it's funny, the reason why I did is because as I was telling Chris when we walked in here, I agreed to something yesterday for August 2nd, starting at 5 o'clock, without realizing that it was my 15th wedding anniversary.
So we will look for that. I get public comment. Do we need to?
Yep.
So we'll open up public comment. If anybody else wants to speak, you can have up to 5 minutes. So let's,
Gentlemen, we're still.
we're still a meeting. So any public comment? Any closing board member comments? Okay, we adjourn this meeting at 11:48. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Did a hell of a job.